Around 34,000 years ago, two children were buried in the frozen ground of what is now Russia. They were laid head to head, and with them, their people buried more than 10,000 beads carved from mammoth ivory. Think about what that means. Each bead had to be cut, shaped, and drilled by hand. Scientists estimate the beads on those two children alone would have taken something like 10,000 hours of work to make. Years of labor, buried in the dirt. Gone. Here is the question that should stop you. Why would starving Ice Age humans, fighting every single day to survive, pour years of work into the grave of two dead children, unless they believed those children were going somewhere and would need it when they arrived? This is the deepest mystery in the human story. Not how ancient humans lived, but what they believed happened when they died. Did they think death was the end? Or did they believe in a journey, a destination, another world waiting on the other side? Did they think the dead disappeared? Or did they think the dead were still here, watching, present among the living? By the end of this video, I'll show you the single discovery that proves beyond reasonable doubt that ancient humans did not believe death was the end. But to understand it, we have to go back to the very first grave, because the first clue isn't a belief written down, it's an act. For most of life's history on Earth, death meant nothing. An animal dies, and its body is left where it falls. Other animals do not bury their dead. They do not mourn at a graveside. They walk away. But at some point, humans stopped walking away. And that single change, the decision to bury a body instead of leaving it, may be the oldest evidence of an idea that would come to define our entire species. Some of the earliest clear burials we know of come from two caves in what is now Israel, Qafzeh and Skhul. Roughly 100,000 years ago, early modern humans dug into the ground and deliberately placed their dead inside. And they didn't just drop the bodies in. The positioning was careful. The bodies were arranged. At Qafzeh, a young child was buried with the antlers of a deer placed across the chest. Other remains were marked with red ochre, a pigment made from iron-rich earth. That ochre matters more than it looks. Across the ancient world, on continent after continent, red ochre appears at burial after burial. Red, the color of blood, the color of life, smeared on the dead again and again by people separated by oceans and tens of thousands of years. Why? We can't ask them. But the pattern is undeniable. Burying the dead, arranging them, and coloring them red was not random. It was meaningful. It was, in some form, a ritual. And rituals exist because people believe something is at stake. You don't perform a ceremony for a rock. You perform it when you think the act matters, when you think it changes something, or sends something, or honors something that is still in some way there. So from the very beginning, the simple act of burial whispers the same thing. These people did not think their dead were simply gone. But burial alone could just be about hygiene, or grief, or keeping predators away. To really know what ancient humans believed, we need something more specific. We need to know what they put in the ground with the body. This is the smoking gun, and it's called grave goods. A grave good is any object deliberately buried alongside the dead. A tool, a weapon, food, jewelry. And the logic behind grave goods is so simple and so powerful that it cuts straight to the heart of the question. Think about it. If you bury someone with their tools, you believe they will have work to do. If you bury them with food, you believe they will get hungry. If you bury them with their finest possessions, you believe they are going somewhere. Those possessions still matter. You do not pack a bag for someone who isn't taking a trip. And ancient humans packed bags. Everywhere we look, in graves stretching back tens of thousands of years, we find the dead buried with the things the living believed they would need. Which brings us back to those two children in Russia, at a site called Sungir. Sungir is one of the most astonishing burial sites ever discovered. Dating to around 34,000 years ago, it held the graves of several individuals, including those two children laid head to head. And the richness of those graves is almost impossible to believe. The bodies were covered in thousands upon thousands of ivory beads, so many that they must once have been sewn onto clothing now long rotted away. There were carved ivory spears, including one made from a mammoth tusk that had been mysteriously straightened, a process we still don't fully understand. There were animal carvings, pierced fox teeth, and bands of ivory. Remember the number. More than 10,000 beads, requiring something on the order of 10,000 hours of skilled labor, buried with children in the frozen earth. No society does this for nothing. The effort poured into Sungir tells us these were not just bodies being disposed of. They were people being prepared, equipped, sent off, dressed in their finest, armed, adorned, ready for whatever came next. The people of Sungir believed in a next. And here's what makes it even more powerful. This wasn't one weird culture. The same instinct shows up again and again across the whole human world. Grave goods appear in burials across Europe, Asia, Africa, the Americas. Different cultures, different objects, but the same underlying belief that the dead are going on a journey and the living must send them prepared. So that's our species. But we weren't the only humans on Earth. And this raises one of the most debated questions in all of archaeology. Did the other humans, the Neanderthals, believe in something after death too? For a long time, the answer was assumed to be no. Neanderthals were supposed to be brutes, incapable of symbolic thought. But the evidence has been chipping away at that idea for decades. At a site called La Chapelle aux Saints in France, a Neanderthal appears to have been deliberately buried in a pit, his body protected from scavengers. The care taken suggests intention, not accident. But the most famous and most haunting case comes from Shanidar cave in the mountains of Iraq. There, the archaeologist Ralph Solecki excavated the remains of several Neanderthals. And around one of them, known as Shanidar 4, he found something extraordinary. Clusters of ancient pollen from multiple species of flowering plants concentrated in the soil around the body. Solecki proposed something that captured the world's imagination. A flower burial, a Neanderthal laid to rest on a bed of wildflowers, mourned by people who gathered blossoms to honor their dead, tens of thousands of years ago. Now I have to be honest with you, because this is exactly the kind of claim that deserves a second look. Other scientists pushed back. The pollen, they argued, might have been carried into the cave by burrowing rodents who are known to store flowers in their nests. The flower burial might be a beautiful mistake, but the debate never fully closed. More recent excavations at Shanidar have found new Neanderthal remains, deliberately placed in the same spot, generation after generation, as if this exact place in the cave was a chosen burial ground, returned to again and again. Whatever the truth about the flowers, Shanidar looks less and less like an accident, and more like a place where Neanderthals brought their dead on purpose. And if that's true, then the belief that death is not the end may be older than our own species. It might go back even further. In a cave system in South Africa, a team led by Lee Berger has made a staggering and deeply controversial claim that a small-brained human relative called Homo naledi was deliberately placing its dead deep inside a pitch-black cave, possibly hundreds of thousands of years ago. Many scientists are skeptical, and the debate is fierce and unresolved. But if Berger is even partly right, it means mortuary behavior, caring for the dead, runs far deeper into our family tree than anyone imagined. So burial is ancient. Grave goods are ancient. The instinct that the dead are going somewhere is ancient. But there's one more layer to this story, and it might be the strangest of all. Because for many ancient humans, the dead didn't fully leave. They stayed. We tend to imagine the afterlife as a faraway place, a heaven, an underworld, somewhere else. But a lot of ancient cultures didn't send their dead far away at all. They kept them close, sometimes terrifyingly close. At a site called Çatalhöyük in what is now Turkey, around 9,000 years ago, people buried their dead beneath the floors of their own homes. They lived directly on top of their ancestors. They slept above the bones of their parents and their children, keeping the dead literally inside the house, part of the household, never truly gone. And then there are the skulls. In the ancient city of Jericho, one of the oldest settlements on Earth, archaeologists found human skulls that had been transformed. The flesh was removed, and then the skull was carefully covered in plaster, sculpted to recreate the face of the dead person. Seashells were pressed into the eye sockets to form eyes. These plastered skulls, around 9,000 years old, were not buried and forgotten. They were kept, displayed, cared for. The faces of dead ancestors, remade, looking back at the living. At Göbekli Tepe, one of the most mysterious sites in the world, older even than agriculture, researchers have found evidence of a skull cult, with human skulls deliberately carved and modified. Something about the head, the seat of the person, was sacred, worth keeping, worth marking. Put it all together, and a picture emerges that is utterly different from how we think about death today. For these ancient humans, dying was not a door slamming shut, it was a transition. The dead went on, to another place, or to a new kind of presence right there among the living. They were buried with what they would need. They were colored with the red of life. They were kept beneath the floor, or remade in plaster, or carried in the form of their own skulls. They were not erased, they were transformed, which leaves the deepest question of all. Why? Why did humans, and maybe our cousins too, develop this overwhelming refusal to accept that death is simply the end? Part of the answer is something that makes us unique. As far as we can tell, we are the only species on Earth that fully understands it is going to die. Every human who has ever lived has had to carry that knowledge, that one day they and everyone they love will be gone. That is a crushing weight. And the belief in an afterlife, in a journey, in a continued existence, may be the most natural response imaginable to a mind that cannot bear the alternative. And there may be something even more intimate behind it. Imagine an ancient human whose mother has just died. That night, they fall asleep and they dream of her. She is there, speaking, moving, alive. They wake, and she is gone again. To a mind without science, without any concept of what a dream even is, what conclusion could be more obvious? She is not gone. She has simply moved to a place you can only visit in sleep. The dead live on. You just saw her. We will never know exactly what images filled the minds of the people at Sungir, or Shanidar, or Jericho. We can't recover their stories of the afterlife, their names for the place the dead went. Those died with them, but we can recover their actions. And their actions speak with overwhelming clarity. They dug the graves, they arranged the bodies, they poured red ochre over the dead. They spent 10,000 hours stringing beads for 2 lost children. They kept their ancestors under the floor and remade their faces in plaster. You do not do any of that for someone you believe has simply ceased to exist. So what did ancient humans think happens after you die? They thought you go on. In every era we can reach, on every continent, with every tool they had, they prepared their dead for a journey and refused to let them vanish. The specifics changed from culture to culture, but the core belief that death is a passage, not an ending, appears so early, so widely, and so consistently that it may be one of the very first ideas humanity ever had. And that single discovery I promised you, the proof that ancient humans believed death was not the end? It's not a temple or a text. It's those 10,000 beads in a child's grave in the frozen Russian ground. Because no one spends years of their life adorning a body for the dark, unless they believe with everything they have that the dark is not where that child is going. So here's my question for you. After everything they did, the graves, the ochre, the beads, the faces remade in plaster, do you think ancient humans were comforting themselves with a beautiful story? Or do you think they knew something we've forgotten? Tell me honestly in the comments. I read every single one. I'll see you in the next one. Pay attention. They're still watching.